Welcome to the Science of Sports Performance, where we discuss the real science of nutrition and exercise, helping you train smarter, fuel better, and perform at your very best. My name is Ben Pressler, and I'm currently an undergraduate student at Brigham Young University, majoring in both nutritional and exercise sciences. I'm pursuing my PhD with the goal of becoming a professor of sports nutrition. Today's episode I'm really excited about because we're going to be talking about powerlifting and maximal strength, neural adaptations, everything like that. The reason I'm so excited about it is because I really feel like it highlights what the show is supposed to be about, the science of sports performance. We're going to be discussing the science of how you can perform as best as possible in the sport of powerlifting. Now, I know I'm not a high-level powerlifting coach. I'm not really even a high-level power lifter. But what I am is a guy who loves to read and learn about the science of exercise physiology and nutrition, and who recently used the science that I've learned about to perform really well in a powerlifting meet. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But in today's episode, you can expect to hear about my experience from where I very first started lifting weights up until now. Learn about how you can grow muscle size to perform better in powerlifting, how you can achieve neural adaptations to get stronger and perform better at powerlifting, as well as a very specific time frame of what sorts of training is common to do leading up to a powerlifting meet to do as best as you possibly can. Now, again, if you are a powerlifter, great. You're going to get a lot of good information out of this episode. Even if you're not, though, many people try and be as strong as they can in certain aspects, whether that is because you are an athlete. I think in our last episode, we discussed athletes like gymnasts and track athletes really want to increase their strength without necessarily putting on too much muscle size and body weight. So the concepts of today's episode will do very well for them, as well as, even if you're not a power lifter, lots and lots of people who go to the gym recreationally or to whatever degree want to squat and deadlift and bench press as much as they can. And I'm going to teach you exactly how you can do that. I'm not necessarily saying everything in my episode today is going to be the only way to do something, not even the best way to do something necessarily. I'm sure you can go onto YouTube and find many powerlifting coaches who've been doing this for a long time, giving their takes. And if that's something that you are interested in, that's awesome. I would say, though, I think my perspective is actually kind of unique as someone who does coach and somebody who does understand the science and the research that goes into this, as well as somebody that is putting this into practice very recently. I think I've said that a couple times now. A couple weeks ago now, I have competed in a powerlifting competition. It was not a super conventional powerlifting competition. It wasn't like USA Powerlifting or the International Powerlifting Federation. It was just, the college that, the college that my wife goes to put it on, and I was allowed to compete. And it was a lot of fun. It was a little bit less conventional in a couple of ways, just because you only got 2 attempts on each lift rather than 3. Some of the rules were a little bit more relaxed, and of course, there was not crazy amounts of high-level powerlifters there attending either. But all the same, the meet turned out very well, and I'll share with you much more about it as today's episode goes on. As I said, I wanted to start talking about my training experience. So I started training weights specifically the summer after my 9th grade year of high school, my freshman year. So the summer between freshman and sophomore year of high school, I started lifting weights with my high school's wrestling team. I did not end up doing wrestling because I just was not very fond of it, but I loved getting to go and do the weightlifting workouts with them in sort of their, preseason summer conditioning. Up until then, I was still interested in exercise. I wanted to get big muscles like superheroes that you see in movies. I think back at this time, like the super classic Chris Evans in Captain America, when he steps out of the machine, that's the dream physique, and you want to get as big muscles as you can as a teenage boy. But my mom did not let me participate in weightlifting. She had heard, all sorts of rumors about, it stunts your growth and it's not good for children until you hit a certain age. And of course, she was just doing her best to keep me safe and make sure that I was not going to have any injuries or bad outcomes at that young age. We know that that's not true now. We know that as long as your form is correct, if you're working with, a parent or a coach or somebody who knows what they're doing, it is very, very safe for young athletes to do things like lift weights and resistance train. It can be very beneficial in a lot of ways. But anyways, I was not allowed to do that until I got to my teenage years and got into high school. But I was very interested in calisthenics because my mom gave me permission to do all sorts of calisthenics training. So I could do push-ups and pull-ups and all these different things. That's actually what got me into doing gymnastics. I've mentioned that in previous episodes as well, that I did gymnastics. And that was because my mom told me that I could just do whatever I wanted with my body weight and doing calisthenics exercises. So I kind of took that and ran with it and got into gymnastics. I liked Ninja Warrior for a long time, that sort of stuff. Anyways, when I finally got into weightlifting, I had a decent amount of musculature developed. I guess that was a very, very long-winded way for me to say that. I had a decent amount of muscle and strength already developed. So when I started weight training, I had a good foundation to kind of go off of. I remember I could not tell you my progression of my deadlift, my progression of my squat. I actually could tell you about my squat that I genuinely, when I was a senior in high school, thought that I could squat 405. And looking back on that, I know that my range of motion was horrendous and hideous. Didn't even get my thighs to parallel. It's probably a 90-degree squat. It was not ideal. I could not squat 405 my senior year of high school, but I thought I could. And so for that reason, I couldn't tell you anything about my squat or my deadlift. I actually didn't really deadlift much in high school either because I had a home gym weight setup in my bedroom, and I think at one point my bedroom had like hardwood floor in it, and so I couldn't like deadlift because it could hurt the wood floor. And then from there, I moved bedrooms to a bedroom that was upstairs, and so if I deadlifted, like if I dropped a weight, it would just like rattle the whole house. So I didn't do much deadlifting. Like I did a little bit, but very, very minimal. And again, for those reasons, I couldn't really tell you like my lifetime progression of those lifts, but I can tell you all about my bench press, as I think a lot of gym bros could do. So when I first started that weight training, when I was that summer after ninth grade, I remember that summer, it was probably 2 or 3 months that I was lifting weights with the wrestling team. My goal was to bench press 135. That's just one 45-pound plate on each side of the bar. It's kind of a big milestone. Those are the big milestones, right? Is those big 45-pound plates. So 135, 225, 315. Those are the big milestones. And I really, really wanted to hit that 135, and I was able to get it by the end of the summer. So that summer, my birthday's in August, and so I was just about to turn 15 that summer. I was 14 years old. So at 14 years old, I bench pressed 135. I want to say maybe a year later or so was when I was able to bench press like 175, but I'm not sure exactly. I bench pressed 225 for the first time when I was 16 years old. So this is going to be about a year and a half later. I remember it was wintertime. I was taking, you had to take a specific like exercise, some sort of class for my high school. So like your freshman year, you took PE, gym class, or basketball, volleyball, everything like that. But then you had to take an additional semester of some sort of physical activity. And one of the classes that was offered at my high school was a weight training class, which I was very excited about. Took the weight training class. And in that weight training class, I was able to hit 225. And I was probably 16 years old in 3 or 4 months. My form was horrendous. I think I still have the video. I was wearing a shirt that was way too small for me, and my butt came up way high into the air. There would definitely be reason to say that it didn't quite count as a bench press for that reason. But again, I'm sure all of us, we were young, teenage boys just loved to hit PRs, and it was silly, but I was proud of the strength that I had developed at that point. Most 16-year-old boys, regardless of the form, cannot bench press 225. I bench pressed 275. That's kind of another milestone on my 19th birthday. I remember that just because I wanted to, as like a birthday present to myself on my 19th birthday, I wanted to max out on my bench press and then go get like a whole box of donuts. And that's exactly what I did. And I hit 275. It actually moved pretty easy. And I think I wanted to try 285, but I didn't get 285. But I remember like feeling like I could have. So anyways, that was on my 19th birthday exactly. And then I didn't hit 315 until I was 21, I think. Because I remember trying it when I was 20. When I was 20, my strength was going pretty well. I hit 295 on my bench press when I was 20. Again, this is around probably December, so I was 20 in a few months. But I hit 295, and my strength I felt like it was increasing so much and so fast that I just wanted to try 315, and I couldn't get it. And I tried it like probably once a month for the next 9 months, and I couldn't get it. It was super frustrating. I think it was a month or two after my 21st birthday that finally I just was trying everything I could. I was doing really, really heavy trainings to try and, I don't know, I didn't have a great idea of what I was doing back then, but I was able to hit that 315 bench press after I was, 21-ish, and that has been my bench press PR since for a long time. This powerlifting meet, I've already kind of told you about. It was a little less conventional. You only got 2 attempts on each lift. So you had your opener, and then you had to name your opener at the weigh-ins, and then after you did your opener, you could tell the judges what you wanted your second attempts to be, depending on how it moved and how you just were feeling. And so that's exactly how it was. For example, on my bench press at this meet, they didn't require a command to press when you're on your chest, which is according to, standard powerlifting rules. That is how it works. You unrack, and then you go down to your chest. And you have to wait for a command from the judge to press. And so that can actually, I'm sure you can imagine, can make it a lot harder. They didn't make me do that, so I'm sure that kind of added probably 20 pounds to my bench press that day. And so it was just a gym press. You weren't allowed to bounce it off your chest, but it just had to be a controlled touch to your chest, and then you could press. But other than that, the squat and the deadlift were all competition standard. The equipment rules were the same, no shirts, no knee wraps or anything. Anyways, at this meet, I was able to do 425 on my squat, 345 on my bench press, and 505 on my deadlift. And I got first place, as I've already mentioned. I did very well in this powerlifting meet. But regardless of the placing I got or ribbons or whatever awards, I progressed very, very well on these lifts, and that's why I'm so proud of them. I think I added probably 10% or so to every single one of my PRs. So up until this powerlifting meet that I did, my squat PR was 385. My bench PR, as I've said, was 315, although I was super frustrated that I couldn't get anything more. And my deadlift PR was 455. Deadlift PR, I really felt like I could have done more. I thought like my deadlift PR truly was higher, but I just, at that point, hadn't ever deadlifted anything more than 455, although I'd tried. Anyways, the powerlifting meet went really well. I added a lot of weight to my totals. This is where I'm at right now. If you need to know how much I lift for my qualifications to talk about this subject, and we are going to go ahead and get right into how I did this, what exactly is happening, the science behind it all. Now, you might be aware when we lift weights, there's really 3 different things going on. So first off is your brain is talking to all of your muscles, right? Each of your muscles has a nerve, and your brain sends electrical impulses through that nerve, and then with electrolytes and calcium and sodium gradients and all those different things, I won't get too deep into that physiology right now, but the electrical impulse that your brain sends is able to trigger action potentials of the muscle, which causes them to contract. And so the brain sends that signal to the muscle contracts, and then as we contract and as we train, our blood is going to then supply the muscle cells with fuel and with oxygen, and they're going to carry away waste products, metabolites, acidity, and things like that, and try and regulate everything so that we can keep on going. And so those are really the three big players, and they're really the three big adaptations to resistance training. So if we train in a lower rep range with higher weights, it's really going to be neurological adaptations, and that's kind of what I want to talk about here shortly. But then if you train with a slightly higher weight or slightly higher rep range, slightly lower weight, it's going to be more of a muscular adaptation from the mechanical tension, a muscular hypertrophy, and that's commonly associated with like a 6 to a 12 rep range, but anywhere between 5 to 30 reps can accomplish that hypertrophy. That's just what it's commonly associated with, is 6 to 12, 6 to 15, somewhere about that. Some people 8 to 12. Anyways, we also then can train our endurance, our muscular endurance. And when we train our muscular endurance, I like to call it, although it's technically not exactly the right thing to say, that we're training our blood. Now, really what we're doing is we are getting more efficient at fueling our muscles and clearing away metabolites. And usually the adaptation that causes that is the formation of new capillaries to our muscle cells so that they get better blood flow. And that better blood flow then is what's going to aid getting fuel to the muscle and clearing waste out of the muscle. So it's not necessarily that our blood changes, but the blood flow that we're getting to the muscle changes. And then this type of training is usually associated with 20 plus reps. But then I've already said, within that 20 to 30 rep range, you still can trigger muscular hypertrophy from mechanical tension. But over that 30, it's definitely more comfortably saying that this is going to be some sort of an endurance training. And I mean, this is kind of a side note, but a lot of times people who just want to get bigger and they want to get stronger, they do lots and lots and lots of push-ups. And I mean, that's not bad. If you don't have access to weights, if you don't have all that right sort of equipment, that makes sense to do. However, if you get to the point where you're doing 30 and 40 and 50 push-ups and you're trying to get stronger and you're trying to get larger muscles, it's probably not going to be very beneficial for you at this point because you're training much more your muscular endurance. At that point, you're going to want to, maybe you could try a one-arm push-up, maybe you could experiment with ways to add resistance to that push-up. But if, again, you need to kind of know how your training aligns with your goals. Now, I'm not going to talk about muscular endurance too much today, and I haven't really talked about it much in any previous episodes of ours. I have kind of talked about how we can increase, muscular hypertrophy in episode 2, manipulating body composition, because, increasing your muscle size is manipulating your body composition. Today, we really are going to focus on those neural adaptations to strength training and understanding how those help us to get stronger. Now, that might be something you're familiar with depending on where you are, how long you've been in the gym and the fitness sphere and athletics and sports, but it is possible to get stronger without getting bigger. It is also possible to get stronger without training super heavy weights, but those adaptations are different. So again, your brain sends those signals to your muscles to contract. So the way that we can get stronger is either by making our brain more efficient at sending those signals to the muscles, or we can get bigger muscles, right? If we get bigger muscles, there's more contractile tissue to contract. And when that bigger muscle contracts, it just naturally is able to move more weight. So if you are a bodybuilder and you're getting stronger, it's because your muscles are getting bigger. Assuming that you are strictly bodybuilding training, you're not really trying to increase, your neural adaptations for strength, but you still can get stronger. That being said, you can get stronger without making really any meaningful size changes. And for some athletes, this can actually be very beneficial. For powerlifting athletes, I think a lot of the times it's just, they want to focus on that neural adaptation because that's what's going to see them results faster than by adding more muscle mass. However, for some athletes, again, as I mentioned, track and field athletes perhaps, gymnasts especially, they want to get these neural adaptations so that they are stronger, but they don't want to increase their body weight too much by adding more musculature so that they can compete at their sport as best as possible. Now, you will also see, I don't want to say debates, but comments about how muscle size does not affect your strength at all. It's completely irrelevant. And that's not true. It's not the case. There is a portion of truth there, and that portion of truth comes from the fact that your neural adaptations make a huge impact. But perhaps you've heard of Anatoly. Maybe you've seen him and you don't know you've heard of him, but he's that guy that goes around gyms and he's dressed up. I don't know if he's wearing a fake beard or if it's a real beard, but he's dressed up as a janitor and he's got this big, just jumpsuit on. So, it kind of hides his physique and how strong he really looks, but he just kind of teases around with these really big, strong guys in the gym who are deadlifting, and he's like, "Oh, could I try?" And the bigger guys are like, "Oh, ha, 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 ha. Well, there's no way you can do this." And he hands them the mop, and it's a special mop that he made that weighs like 70 pounds, and they're shocked, and then he deadlifts their hundreds of pounds, 500-600 pounds that they have on the bar, and they're blown away. And people like to use him as a great example because, he is very, very, very strong, though he is not necessarily very, very large. He has a great physique. He has great developed muscles. He's very lean as well, which is great. But he is incredibly strong. Now, I don't know exactly how big Anatoly is, but I think it could be conceivable to say that I have more muscle mass than he does. However, he's way stronger than me, which to a lot of people means that muscle has nothing to do with your strength. Now, if we look at that, say from like a powerlifting team, the USA powerlifting team, for example, there are definitely people who are that elite level of powerlifter who have less muscle mass than me and are stronger than me because they are better, they're more trained, they know what to do better, have better, whatever it is. They are better powerlifters than me, though perhaps they don't have as much muscle as I do. They weigh less than me. And that could do with leverages or training or coaching or whatever. But the fact of the matter could just be that their muscles are stronger than mine because of those neural adaptations. However, if you apply this to the same USA powerlifting team, there's different weight classes. And as you go up in the weight classes, they get stronger, right? They go up in weight class, they go up in their muscle mass, they have more muscle on their frames, and they're stronger. And so at those higher weight classes, you could say that same thing, right? Maybe there's somebody who has more muscle mass than them. These are very, very muscular guys. But say, like these Mr. Olympia bodybuilders, these guys that have more muscle mass than they do, but are not as strong. And that's because of those neural adaptations. But if you take two people with incredible neural adaptations, the one who has more muscle mass is still going to be stronger. So assuming that all makes sense, let's talk about what exactly these neural adaptations are. It's pretty clear from the literature that neural adaptations exist, but as I was thinking about this and wanting to make this episode, I realized that I didn't know exactly how to explain how or why they happen. Like, I didn't really have a mechanism in mind. Like, I just know that it's true. We know that your brain gets stronger at sending these electrical signals, but I really didn't know how to explain it. So I did try and take a deep dive into that research so I could give you a good answer. One thing I discovered is that one way that we do know that this does happen is because of something called electromyography. Myo, M-Y-O, is a prefix that's used a lot of time in medicine and science, just relating to the muscle. And so electromyography is just a device that we use to study the amount of electricity that is being sent to the muscles by the brain. And one thing that we can understand is that as we train somebody to hopefully develop these neural adaptations through electromyography, we're able to see the amount of electricity sent to their muscles increases. So the study, and I guess it's not a study actually, it's a review article. I love review articles. I think they're awesome. It's just a lot like a textbook that is published. It's going over lots of data, and it's kind of just presenting consensus of information. It's a lot like a meta-analysis, but it's a lot like a textbook and broken up into different sections. So this one is called the Adaptations to Strength Training. And I thought this was really awesome. It's 24 pages, so it's not too long. If any of you guys want to read it, I highly recommend it. This was by Jonathan Foland and Alan Williams out of Loughborough University in the United Kingdom. It was written in 2007, or at least published in 2007, but it is really, really good. So the full title is The Adaptations to Strength Training, Morphological and Neurological Contributions to Increased Strength. So it's just divided into those two sections. The first one is the morphological adaptations, and what that means is muscular hypertrophy changes in the structure of the muscles. And then the second section is about neurological adaptations. And it talks about a lot of different, theories and hypotheses about how these neural adaptations come about. And then it just reviews a lot of different research going over these different things. And I really liked a lot of the things that it was talking about. And I just wanted to highlight a few of them for you. The first is it begins talking about neurological adaptations. It says neural adaptations are essentially changes in coordination and learning that facilitate improved recruitment and activation of the involved muscles during a specific strength task. Now, this is not going to be a perfect analogy, but it's almost just like a warm-up, right? It's like a super prolonged, anyways, this is why the analogy is not perfect. But you know how like when you go to the gym and you haven't warmed up yet, you're feeling kind of stiff, then all you got to do is warm up, and then your blood flow improves. You're kind of turning on your sympathetic drive, as well as your nervous system's kind of beginning to activate the muscles. And as you do this, you get stronger, right? The warm-up kind of helps you prepare for your heavy lifting and do better overall. Again, not a perfect analogy, but these neurological adaptations are a lot like that. Just by using something and practicing using it, you get better at using it. So as you really, really force your brain to send these strong electrical impulses to the muscles to contract, they get better at it. Now, this article, it goes on to, like I said, explain a lot of different causes, but it shows some really cool evidence for how these neurological adaptations work. And a lot of it really is just practice. You know, your brain just needs to become more efficient at sending these impulses to your muscles. Now, for one thing, the heavier you lift and the closer you push to failure, the more of your muscle fibers are recruited. One way you can think of it is that your body is lazy. So it's just always going to want to do, or really what it is, it's efficient. But if you can lift a certain object or do a certain task and only need to recruit a certain number of muscle fibers to do it, that is what's going to be most efficient and beneficial for your body. That's exactly what's going to happen. But as you get closer to failure and you lift heavier weights, your body is going to have to contract all the muscle fibers to get something done. It's going to increase that motor unit recruitment. And so for one, as we train that really, really heavy weight and that really, really low reps to get stronger, our body just gets more effective at turning on all those muscle fibers to work all at the same time. And that can help increase our strength. One of the ways that they kind of demonstrated this is through imagined contractions. Now, I read this in the review article. I haven't gotten into the studies that it's referencing themselves, so I'm not exactly sure what they mean when they say imagined contractions. I don't know if that means that they're contracting something without any resistance, or if it means they're literally just imagining contracting. But they found equivalent strength increases for real and imagined training, which were both greater than a control group. So it was in the forearm. They were having these participants do forearm exercises. And again, I don't know the exact study design, but they had 3 groups: a control, someone kind of a negative control, and a positive control. So they had a control that didn't train. They had a control that trained in an actual training method. And then they had a group that just imagined training, imagined contractions. And they found equivalent strength increases, which kind of shows that we can improve that neural adaptation without really making any meaningful changes into our muscle. There's also kind of evidence of a crossover training effect. So this can be beneficial for people perhaps who have injuries. Like if you have a knee injury and you're letting it recover, you're in some sort of a brace and you can't bend your knee. you can actually strengthen your other leg and train your other leg, and some of those neural adaptations that your brain is developing in your non-injured healthy leg can actually transition over to your injured leg. And so that can be a great way to kind of maintain and keep some of that strength that you possibly are going to lose while you're unable to use that injured body part. Now, another thing that is really cool, basically, as our brain sends that electrical impulse, it's kind of like governed. So it can't send as strong as possible of a electrical impulse as our muscle could technically tolerate. And a lot of this is, for safety. If we just sent some crazy, crazy strong electrical impulse to a muscle, it could really hurt. It could damage the muscle. It could damage tendons and ligaments. It would probably just be very, very painful to do so. But if we can non-voluntarily stimulate a muscle with electricity, I've actually seen, perhaps you have as well, videos of people hitting like a squat PR with electrodes attached to their legs, and then they kind of have a non-voluntary muscular contraction to get that weight up, and then they're able to hit a huge squat PR. And the videos don't look comfortable, right? It looks very, very painful and crazy. You're literally getting electrocuted to get this weight up. So it's not something that I recommend, but it just kind of goes to demonstrate how we are stronger, right? If we hooked you up to electrodes, you'd be stronger than you are right now. So as we train our brain to send these impulses, it is just going to develop the ability to send a stronger impulse, which is going to make us stronger. Another thing that it goes into in this article is just the firing frequency. So the frequency of the electrical impulse that is sent to the muscles. So using electromyography, which we've already discussed, scientists were able to, just determine the firing frequency of a muscle. So as somebody is trying to produce maximum force output in their muscle, there is a very, very brief moment where there is a 1 to 200 hertz electrical impulse in the muscle. And then after that very, very brief period, it's a much lower rate of about 20 to 30 hertz. And that's kind of sustained as they're trying to put out that maximum force. And what the scientists did in this study is they were able to non-voluntarily contract a muscle. I believe it was actually a biopsied muscle, so it wouldn't cause pain to a participant. And what they found is that they were able to increase the force output up to 50 hertz. So they slowly increased the frequency of the electrical impulse being sent to this muscle, and the force output increased all the way up into 50. And so again, in our own bodies, on average, we send about 20 to 30 hertz, but then it could go up to 50 and we'd still get stronger, which shows that, with this help of, non-voluntary electrical impulse, we could be twice as strong. If we just had all the electricity in the world go into our legs, we would max out at probably about twice as strong as we could be voluntarily, which is awesome. And so as we think about that and all these neurological adaptations to strength training, really what it does just boil down to is our brain gets better at it. It's a lot like practice. Practice makes perfect at anything, right? If you want to get better at your sport, you practice your sport. And if you want to get better at singing, you practice singing. And you just get better because you do it a lot. And when you train in this way, your brain gets better. And your brain is a critical piece in this puzzle. And so even if your muscles don't necessarily get stronger, your brain gets better at making them contract and you get a lot stronger. Now, I'm realizing that I think I've mentioned this method of training to get stronger probably a few times now without actually really going into what that means. And what's common is when we're trying to do some sort of a strength training protocol, it's going to be very, very heavy weight, very low reps. So that is low volume training. So rather than doing like 8 reps, 10 reps, 12 reps in a set, you're going to do something much lower, like 3 to 6. So you could do a very, very heavy weight and just do a set of 3. Now, there's limitations to this, like some people might have a higher injury risk when training in this way, but generally, although there's lots of different methods of like how exactly you're going to trigger, this neural activation and get this adaptation, pretty much what it boils down to is just you're using heavy weight and you're doing lower reps. With that being said, I want to kind of go into another study that I enjoyed. This one is called Muscular Adaptations in Response to 3 Different Resistance Training Regimens, Specificity of Repetition Maximum Training Zones. So this study was out of Ohio University. It's from 2002. But what they did is they took 32 untrained men. Now, I will say that lots and lots of exercise and resistance training studies use untrained participants. And so you have to take everything with a grain of salt and a lot of nuance there, because there are meaningful differences when you take someone who is intermediately trained and especially someone who is advanced trained, both in how much they know about exercise and how much they're willing to push themselves, but also just in you plateau after a while. Your strength gains come much slower than when you are a new lifter. Anyways, these were 32 untrained men, and they divided them into 4 groups if you include the control. So they had a control group that did not train at all over this course of the study. Then they had one group that trained in 3 to 5 repetitions. They had a second group that trained in 9 to 11 repetition zone, and then they had a third group that performed in the 20 to 28 rep zone. So it's pretty broad, and I like the way that they divided this out. I feel like, there's not too much overlap. They're different enough, right? So 3 to 5 has quite several reps between 9 and 11. 9-11 has quite a few reps between 20 and 28. And what they're looking for is specific muscular adaptations. They look at fiber type in this study, and they really are curious about what sort of adaptations they're going to find in all 3 of the groups. We, of course, are going to be kind of focusing on that first group that trained in that 3 to 5 repetition range. So what they did is, they assessed these participants for VO2 max and lots of these different things, height, weight, but then they found their 1 rep max, and then they wanted to have them train in a certain percentage of that 1 rep max and trying to get, of course, their optimal rep ranges. And they tested them in this study at the beginning and the end. It was an 8-week training intervention. They wanted to test these participants in how much their 1 rep max increased, but then they also tested them on how many reps they could do with 60% of their 1 repetition max. So if someone was able to squat 500 pounds, then 60% of that would be 300 pounds. So they would want to see how many times that person can rep 300 pounds. They did the 2 trials on the same day, or the 2 tests, right, on the same day, and they always had the 1 rep max be first, both because the repetitions to failure with your 60% would be pretty exhausting, and it would it would mess up your 1 rep max more than your 1 rep max would mess up that. But then the other thing is they needed to know what this person's 1 rep max was, right? If you don't know what your 1 rep max is, you can't see how many times you can do 60% of it. Anyways, they the first 4 weeks of this study, like I said, it was an 8-week intervention. They trained 2 days a week, and then for the second set of 4 weeks, they trained 3 days a week. And these were lower body workouts. They trained the leg press, a barbell squat, and leg extensions. And I think the results from this study were actually pretty cool, pretty interesting, because you see, and again, these are untrained lifters, so it's different, but one thing that I thought was really, really cool is that if you look at the muscular hypertrophy numbers, so if you look at the cross-sectional area of these people's leg muscles, the low rep group that trained in 3 to 5 actually is the one that had the greatest increase the greatest nominal increase in the cross-sectional area of their muscles on average. This study did not show, nor did I calculate the percentage. So perhaps the intermediate rep group had a greater percentage increase, which is awesome and very, very valuable information. But what it goes to show is that you can grow muscle on low rep training. Now, another thing that's interesting is that you can increase strength on intermediate and high rep training. Now, again, this is something I will commonly do, but for all my YouTube watchers, let's see. Yeah, there you go. Maybe you can press pause here, whatever you'd like to do, but that is the results for their strength. So on one column is their 1 repetition maximum, and on the other column is the maximum repetitions with 60% of their 1 rep max. Now, the results are exactly what you expect, right? Is that the group that had the greatest increase in their 1 repetition maximum was the low training reps. And the group that had the highest increase in the number of reps they could do with 60% of their maximum was the high rep training group. Now, one thing that definitely could make sense, if you look at this, you will actually see that the group that did the low rep training, so the really, really heavyweight training, they actually averaged a decrease in their ability to do the 60% for maximum repetitions. On the leg press, at least, they lost endurance in that sense. One thing that I just want to point out in that sense is that they had a higher increase in their 1 repetition maximum. So that also means that they had a higher increase in what their 60% of that 1 repetition maximum is, whereas the high rep group that's training more endurance had a smaller increase in their 1 rep max. And so when they were trying to do their follow-up for how much weight or for how many times they could do 60%, it was much closer to the same weight, whereas the low rep group had to do a lot more weight on that 60%. So that could kind of explain that difference there. Now, it does still go to show you that, your training method definitely affects the adaptation that you're going to produce, and you should pick your goal and see what it is. But really my takeaways from this are, the rep ranges produce the outcomes that we thought they were going to, but then also that you can get stronger doing higher reps. You can gain muscle, get muscular hypertrophy doing low reps. Let's see. So the maximal dynamic strength improvements in the leg press exercises amounted to 61% increase for maximum dynamic strength. That's the 1 rep max for low rep, compared to 36% for intermediate rep and 32% for high rep. So it's a huge increase in what the low rep got, but the high rep group that was doing 20 to 28 reps per set still got a 32% increase in their 1 repetition maximum, which is awesome. And if you compare that to the intermediate group especially, the intermediate group got a 36% increase. Now, again, what's your goal, right? If your goal is, how do I want to say this? If your goal is to increase your muscular endurance, but you're worried that you're not going to get very strong if you do that, this shows that you can do both. Now, the big difference is that the high rep group did not gain a ton of muscle. It did gain muscle, but I think it gained about half as much as the other groups did. So what's your goal? If your goal is strength and size, then you should, train low reps. If your goal is strength and size again, but a little bit less strength and maybe a little better endurance, then you should train intermediate if you just want to go all across the board. But then if your goal is endurance and size, but not strength, then you should try for high reps, according to this study. Now, the reason I say all of that, for all the different adaptations that you can get, is because it's actually common in powerlifting to do something called periodization. So that's actually a word that maybe you've heard. When I first heard it, I didn't know what it meant, and maybe I felt a little bit dumb, but it's actually kind of simple. All it means is the creation of different periods throughout your training. So it's much more common in powerlifting than in other types of training, like bodybuilders just kind of they always have the same goal, and they always are going to be kind of training the same way to reach that goal because they care about muscular hypertrophy. That is somebody who's strictly interested in muscular hypertrophy. Whereas powerlifting athletes need to have different goals. And so the periodization just means that they go throughout training and they have different training blocks. They could be 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. But they have these different blocks, and they're going to be doing different relative weights, and they're going to be doing different amounts of volume, different numbers of accessories to incur different results, right? Because as we've talked about, muscular size does impact your strength, but then also just training for neural adaptations really, really affects your strength. If you think about it, the best thing that you can do as a powerlifting athlete then is to increase your muscle size and then train that new muscle size to be as strong as possible through neural adaptations. So there's going to be a little bit of both going on in a standard powerlifting meet or a powerlifting periodization program. Now, what I've done is I divided sort of powerlifting periodization into 5 groups. And perhaps this is a little bit of an oversimplification, but I think it's better to understand sort of the simple goals of a periodization. And I guess what this is kind of entail is, let's say that you were going to compete in a powerlifting meet 6 months from now. This would kind of be the 6 months leading into this, right? Maybe it could be less, maybe it could be 4 months, but you are where you're at right now. You're going to compete, and this day we're going to set you up a training block so that you can compete as best as you possibly can on that day. Now, briefly, I've divided it into 5 sections. The first one is your growth phase, muscular hypertrophy. The second phase is your strength phase, so your neural adaptations. Then you are going to peak, which we're going to get into. You're going to deload, and then you're going to compete is phase number 5. And so I'm going to kind of go over some general ideas from this, as well as share about my experience at my powerlifting meet. So the first is the growth phase, right? Again, as we've talked about, if you have more contractile tissue, you're going to get stronger because there's just more muscle to move the weight. Now, one thing that we mentioned before is that you have a certain amount of motor unit recruitment. So as the weight and as the proximity to failure increases, the motor unit recruitment is also going to increase. And so you could increase to a certain point to where you were in the past, and then if you still have more motor units than you used to, then your motor unit recruitment is going to increase to that level, and that's going to make you stronger. So we want to grow. I don't want to go super far into the how we grow muscle because I've discussed that in other episodes, and this is more so a powerlifting episode, but it's important to understand that it is prudent to grow, right? So somebody who is trying to be a better powerlifter should not just have the idea of they're only ever going to get neural adaptations. Now, in that study that I just went over, we read and we understood that you still can gain muscle size doing very, very low rep training, but for the sake of fatigue and injury risk, it is a good idea to have a training block, a training period of muscular hypertrophy. So what you're going to be doing is focus on mechanical tension. You're going to be training probably in a slightly higher rep range. You're going to be more intentional. You're going to be looking for things that are more stable. You're going to be training in a range of motion that really stretches your muscles as much as you can, rather than putting them in a position where they can lift as much weight as possible. So, for example, maybe you'd want to do some sort of a hack squat or a pendulum squat so you can get really, 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 really deep, right? Maybe you don't want to do that with a barbell squat because you think it might throw off your technique, but you should train your legs in some sort of a way where they're going to, grow. So big range of motion, big stretch, intentional training, stability is a big thing. And then you're just going to want to work in that probably 6 to 12 rep range is what I always recommend, and then try and get stronger there. And those strength gains are likely going to be in the form of muscular hypertrophy, more contractile tissue. That growth phase is going to be really, really, really important. Not spending much time on that, like I said, but don't neglect it, okay? The second phase, and this is the reason I say that perhaps this is oversimplified, is because you don't just have one training block of strength improvement. Usually, probably what this would look like is you might have a month and a half to 2 months, let's just say like an 8-week training block of hypertrophy training, and then you would move into a strength block of training, and then you would do that strength block for maybe 6 weeks, and then you'd probably take a little bit of a deload, and then you'd have another 6-week training block of strength where maybe it was a little lower volume, maybe it was a little higher volume. You just kind of change things up based on how you're doing and what your coach, tells you to do. And then, you could have, I guess what I'm trying to say is you could have several different strength training blocks within this one thing that I have grouped as your strength training block, right? So it's not quite so simple as just you have one 6-week or one 8-week strength period, although, that's going to certainly get you stronger. If we actually were doing like a 4-month, 5-month, 6-month powerlifting prep, you'd probably have a couple different training blocks. One thing that's going to change a lot throughout that as well, as I mentioned, volume, meaning the weight that you use and the reps that you use and how many sets that you do. One thing that could change as well is the amount of accessories. So accessory lifts are lifts that work the same muscles, but are not the same lifts as your squat, bench, deadlift, because those are the 3 lifts. So for example, on your bench press, an accessory could be a tricep extension, it could be a dip, it could be a chest fly. Those are great ways to increase volume. You're probably going to be doing a lot of accessories on your hypertrophy and your growth phase, but then that's something that could vary a lot in your strength phase. Usually it's common to kind of cut down on that from when you were doing your growth phase, but you still want to keep them, right? So for your deadlift, back extensions, a hyper extension machine. For squats, you could be doing different types of squats, and you could be doing lunges. All these things are training and strengthening the muscles that you are using while they are not the same lift. And then in this strength phase, we've talked about how we're doing heavyweight and low reps, but there's actually a lot of different techniques that you can do this at. Now, I'd say typically the best way to do this is in a 3 to 6 rep range. That's really, really going to be sort of your bread and butter. So it wouldn't be probably uncommon for you to just try and take a weight and just try and do it for 6 reps, same weight for 5, same weight for 4, right? Just because you're going to be a little more fatigued on your second and third set. So you do a 6, and then you do a 5, and then you do a 4. Another thing that's very, very common for powerlifters is doing the 5x5. So that is 5 sets of 5 reps. A lot of bodybuilders aren't going to be doing 5 sets of an exercise. You're going to be doing 2 or 3. I don't really do 5x5s, but it is something that's very popular among powerlifters. So you want to keep the weight. Maybe you need to change it and lower it as you get a little more tired, but you're going to be doing 5 sets of 5 reps. And that, I think, is kind of a cool thing to do. Maybe I should include it more in my powerlifting training, but I just think it really gets you to be very robust. And that's kind of anecdotal, but obviously it's in that rep range, and with the heavy weight, that's going to get you those neural adaptations. But then it's also just kind of working on your endurance. You're going to be on that lift for a long time, just continually putting out those neural adaptations, taking long rest times in between those sets. And I think that's a very, very good technique. So if I was going to be doing a 5x5, to me, it would probably look like doing something like 280. I'm going to say like a bench press. I'd probably do like 285 for 5. Then what I might do is a 285 cluster set. And I'll go into what that is just right after. Then I'd probably do it down to 275, and then a 275 cluster set, and then 265. So it would have been 5 sets of 5 reps on my bench press. Now, cluster sets are something that the research shows to be pretty cool, pretty useful tool. Basically, all that means is that you do a set that's kind of composed of mini sets. So for example, like I said, I would do 285 for 5, and then I would try and do a 285 for 5 cluster set. So I'm going to be a little tired. I can't quite do 285 for 5 again, but maybe I could do it for 3 and then get one more and then get one more. So I would do it for 3 reps, and then I'd rack it and then just take a 20, 30-second break, probably not even that long, probably 10 to 20-second break, and then do one more, rack it, and do one more and rack it. So technically that was 3 sets, but it's a cluster set, right? So I did that 1 set of 5, but it was a 3 and then a 1 and then a 1, or it could be a 3 and then a 2. And that's just kind of a cool way to kind of push yourself a little harder than you could have, because like I said, if I did a 3-1-1, well, before I would have just done it for 3 and then been done. But because of that cluster set, I can kind of push the envelope a little further, which can be a great tool for that strength gain. One thing that I have been doing more recently, leading up into my powerlifting meet that I did, was I don't really even know if it has a name. I heard about this from Lane Norton, and Lane Norton was describing how he heard it, I believe, from Eric Trexler, who's an exercise scientist, works for Stronger by Science, which is, they have like an email newsletter. Very, very cool. I love their work. They're very, very smart, talented guys there. But the way the ideology behind it is that if you were doing 3 sets of 8 reps, which isn't, uncommon to do. It's not in that 3 to 6 reps, but it's 3 sets of 8 reps on an exercise, let's say a deadlift. But your goal is to do it for powerlifting. That is going to be 24 reps with, say, you're deadlifting 405 for that. So you're doing 3 sets with 405. They're all 8 reps. You're doing 24 reps total with 405 in this workout. And the idea was just that when we are powerlifting, really what we care about is our force production. So at the start of a set, you're going to be able to move it a lot faster. And then at the end, it's going to be a lot slower moving weight. But the weight is the same. So when the speed changes, we know that we are putting more force into the bar. And that's what we care about, is the force production. So his idea was that what if instead of doing 3 sets of 8, we did 6 sets of 4. And then you're doing those first 4 reps of that set of 8 that are a little faster than that second, 5 through 8. Then you're doing the exact same amount of volume, the exact same amount of reps with the exact same weight, but your force production is higher. Now, in case that's a little unclear, again, instead, the weight's going to stay the same, but instead of doing 3 sets of 8, you're doing 6 sets of 4, and then hopefully that is making it so that all of the reps you're doing are faster and you have higher force production. Now, the limitations of this is that you're not working in as close of proximity to failure. So your motor unit recruitment is going to go down slightly because you're not, getting that super close proximity to failure. So it's not something that I would necessarily recommend you do all the time. It shouldn't be your only technique, but I think it can be definitely a great way. It's definitely be lower fatigue and lower injury risk because you're not pushing so close to failure. And I think it can be a really, really cool way to get stronger. It's actually something that I did because I hurt my back deadlifting back in maybe October. And as I was trying to get back into it, I was just worried, like if I pushed myself really, really close to failure, if I was going to, worsen that injury or re-injure myself. And so I tried this methodology where I was doing that first half of the set, higher force production, less injury risk, and I thought it worked out really, really great. And again, it's not something that I'm going to do exclusively. You should change it up. And as I mentioned, you're probably going to be doing different amounts of training blocks, probably 2 or 3 within a certain powerlifting prep. And it could definitely be something to include. Another cool tool is the pyramid set, which you might know. Basically, pyramids are big at the bottom and small at the top. And that's exactly what it is. You do a set of 5 and then a set of 3 and then a set of 1 and then go back down. So a set of 3 and then a set of 5. So that is called your pyramid. Sometimes you go up and down the pyramid. Sometimes you just go up. So you would do, it could be with the same weights, but commonly you increase the weight. So you do a set of 5, a set of 3, a set of 1. For me, if I was going to do a pyramid set, it would look like doing probably 275 on a bench press for 5, and then it would look like doing 295 on a bench press for 3, and then doing 315 or 325 on a bench press for just one single. And then you could go back down or not. I don't do pyramid sets just because I don't super enjoy training that way, but it is a great tool for those who might be interested in it. What I prefer to do is something called reverse pyramid training. So it's exactly what I described in reverse, right? Instead of doing 5-3-1, you would do 1-3-5. That's something that I have just found to be really, really beneficial for me. It's something I recommend to everybody is reverse pyramid training. So you start with your heaviest weight for the lowest reps, and then you lower the weight and you increase the reps. You lower the weight, you increase the reps. I do that for my powerlifting exercises. I do it for my bodybuilding exercises. I love it. I've fallen in love with it since I started trying it. I really recommend it. Start with your heaviest weight, and then you're going to lower the weight and increase the reps, lower the weight and increase the reps. I feel like it's a great way to get stronger and to just kind of push yourself to, close to failure every single set. It's been really, really great. So what I would probably do is do a single with like 325 on bench press, do a triple with 295, and then do a set of 5 with 275, reverse pyramid. In terms of volume and frequency, it's really going to depend on the person. And really the guideline is train as often as you can while still doing well. It's probably going to be between 1 and 3 times a week that you're doing all of your power lifts. Really the limitation is usually with like muscle size. So for a lot of people, they can do their bench press more often because they recover more quickly from it, whereas they can't squat and deadlift quite as often. Some people feel differently about squat and about deadlift. I feel super, super exhausted every time I squat. Squatting to me is pretty tough. And so I commonly will squat just once a week, maybe twice. Deadlift, many people, the deadlift is what's super, super fatiguing to them. For me, it's not so bad. I could deadlift 2 times a week pretty reliably, depending on how heavy I was going. So if I was really, really, really pushing myself on the deadlift, I might need to drop it down to once a week as well. But I could probably deadlift twice a week. I could squat twice a week, but I prefer to do it once a week. And then I do bench press twice a week, though I could probably do it 3 times depending on my training. So if you're serious about powerlifting and you want to get yourself lifting as much as possible at this meet and figuring out this periodization and everything, work with a coach. You really should work with a coach. Unless you just have a good understanding of how this all works. For myself, I coached myself at this powerlifting meet because I have a good understanding of it, and I've been training for a long time. I know myself. I know my body. But if you're serious about this and you don't feel like you have this good understanding of all these limitations and all this nuance and all this context and the volume and the weights and the recovery, you should get a coach. You really, really should. I'd love to be your coach. That would be great. I'd love to be someone's powerlifting coach. I do offer lots of coaching, but I've never coached anyone else to powerlift, only myself. Anyways, I did a good job coaching myself, I sure think. So moving on, I want to talk about the peak week because that's actually what I'm most proud of myself. If you do a good peak and a good deload, you can really, really blow a competition out of the water. And that's what our next phase is. Phase 3 is our peak, and phase 4 is our deload. Then phase 5 is competition day. So when you peak for a powerlifting meet, basically you're doing really, really heavy singles and doubles. Now, some coaches will have a peak be 1 week. Some coaches will have a peak be 2 weeks. Some will even have it be like a 4-week training block. For me, I just did a peak week. And so peak week was 2 weeks before my competition date. And then the 1 week before my competition was deload. But anyways, the purpose of the peak is to kind of see where all of your strength is at. So you shouldn't think of your peak week as gaining strength. What you're trying to do on your peak week, for my case, it was a peak week, is to see what strength you have. So you've already built all of your strength in your growth phase and in your strength phase. And when you're doing your peak, you're just trying to see what kind of strength you've done, because perhaps throughout your strength phase, you never did anything less than a set of 4 or a set of 3. So you don't really know what you're doing for heavy singles and heavy doubles. You don't have a great idea of how much weight you want to try and do in competition. So what you're going to be doing during peak week is just heavy singles, heavy doubles, and then probably a back off set. Your accessory lifts probably are going to be like non-existent, and you really are just going to be focusing on how much am I going to be lifting at competition. And so for me, for example, I've already told you that going into my peak week, my squat PR was 385. I knew that I had done 385 before, so I knew that hypothetically I could. So on my first lift of peak week, I wanted to try and squat 385. It moved pretty slow. I was actually pretty discouraged with the way it moved, but as I did it, I became more familiar with how it moved. And so I knew where my sticking point was. I knew the point in the lift that I really, really needed to push through. So I actually, although it moved super, super slow when I tried it the first time at that workout, I was able to do it again a second time with better form, better just mental perspective on this lift because I had just done it. And I think really that's the purpose of peak week, is to know how it feels to do a certain weight and know where your sticking points are, know what you need to do to get a heavy, heavy single lift at the meet. And so for that, it worked really, really well. I did 385 twice on the first lift of my peak week. On your peak week, I want you to try and do 2 lifts for each exercise. 2 squats, 2 bench presses, 2 deadlifts. And then just you kind of want to increase the intensity. You want it to be very not fatiguing. You want it to be kind of, I don't want to say low intensity because you're going to be pushing yourself really, really hard, but you're not going to be doing lots and lots and lots of sets. You're probably going to be doing 2 sets of like a heavy single or double, and then 1 back off set with 70%, 60% of your 1 rep max, just to get a little bit of extra work in there. But again, the purpose of this week is not to increase your strength, but it's to see what strength you've gained throughout the rest of your programming. So then for another example, on my bench press, I knew for a fact that I could do 315 because I had done it all the time. I did heavy singles with 315 as part of like pyramid sets, reverse pyramid sets, all throughout my strength block. I knew that I could do 315, but every time I had ever tried to do more than 315, I hadn't been able to done it, which was super, super aggravating to me. But I decided that as part of my peak week, because I hadn't tried it for a little while, I was going to try 325. And so I did, and it moved way faster than I thought it was going to. So this is a great example of how I expressed the strength that I had gained throughout my strength block. And then because it moved super, super fast and super, super easy, I decided, my wife was egging me on too, just getting me to do it, which was awesome. I decided to try 335, which was crazy. I didn't think I was going to be able to do that. And then I did. It moved, and I did 335. And so that, like I said, great example of how in your peak week, you're trying to realize the strength that you can have on your meet day. Now, if I hadn't done that, I probably would have gone in to the meet wondering if I could even do 325. I might have had my opening lift be 315 just so I could get something on the board because I didn't know. And I just really hoped to maybe get 335. But instead, because I did my peak week and I did 335 during my peak week, I knew that I could do it. So I opened with 335, which is what allowed me to hit 345 on my second attempt. Deadlift was very, very similar. Up until then, my deadlift PR was 455. I had actually done 455 for a set of 3, so I knew that my PR was not 455. I just had never done anything more than 455. And so I tried 475, and I got it. Then I tried 485, and I got it. That is your standard peak week, and it was really, really good. Sorry, that's not your standard peak week. That's the standard first half of your peak week. And then the second half of your peak week, you're going to do it all over again. And so your fatigue is probably going to be a little higher. So that's something to kind of keep in mind, but you still just really, really want to see how you can push yourself. So on my second squat workout of my peak week, I started with a 395 single because I had done 385 twice in one workout. I knew that it wasn't my max. So I tried 395 and it still moved really, really slow. But as I did it, I was like, well, it was slow, but it wasn't like painful, you know? Maybe you don't know, but like if you've ever hit like a really, really crazy PR, like it feels like your eyes are about to explode out of your head and it's kind of a little bit painful. I hit 395 and though it was slow, it was not painful and slow. So I thought, oh, I'm feeling kind of tired. Like, what am I going to do? But I kind of want to try and see if I can do 405 because that's what I'd love to open with at the meet. And well, so I tried it and I got it. And it was painful this time, but I got it, which was awesome. My bench, the next workout I did of peak week, I was again feeling a little bit tired, but still okay. And what I did is I actually started with a 335 single, and it moved pretty well. But then I did another 335 single just to see if I could. This one I really didn't know if I was going to get it, but I pushed through it and I did. So I did 335 twice in one workout, which to me gave me a ton of confidence to do as my opener and made me kind of think that that was not actually my PR, which it wasn't. It was 345 at the competition. Though 345 actually kind of moved really well, so maybe I should try 350. I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, my deadlift, though, my second deadlift workout of peak week was pretty bad. I was super tired. I wanted to go for 495 because I had done 485 and 475 at workout 1. I wanted to try 495. I did try 495, and I couldn't get it. My back was feeling really tired. I just couldn't wedge myself in there very good. My form was bad, and I didn't get it. So I took, some weight off. Instead of 495, I tried to do 475 because I know that I had done that, and then 485, the workout before, and then I couldn't even do that. I was just so tired. So that was actually kind of discouraging for me. But that leads us into the deload week. The deload week, the goal of the deload is to reduce your fatigue. So anytime that we work out, we are accruing stimulus that is going to help us be stronger and more fit, but we're also accruing fatigue. So that's why, like, if I hit a squat PR today and then I tried to go hit it again tomorrow, although I did accrue stimulus that's going to make me stronger today, I've also accrued fatigue that's going to make it so that I can't hit it tomorrow, not to mention the fact that that stimulus that's going to make me stronger hasn't actually really come into play yet. It's going to take probably 2 or 3 days. And, you always try and rest and recover in between workouts so you can do well. But the deload week, you really are just taking off. So when I did my deload week, I went to the gym once. So for my powerlifting meet, it was on a Friday night. And so I did my peak week. It was Monday to Saturday the week before. And then I only went to the gym once on Tuesday, the week of the powerlifting meet. So I didn't go Monday or Wednesday or Thursday. All I went was Tuesday. And when I went on Tuesday, I used probably 60% of my suspected 1 rep max, or I guess of the heaviest weight that I did during peak week. And then I did just a little bit of technique work. Now, you wouldn't even technically need to do that. But a lot of people, my wife competed at the powerlifting meet with me, and she was this way, definitely. She had done peak week with me and everything. We were discovering how strong she was. She was doing really well. You know what I'm realizing actually just now, as I said, I've never coached anyone else to a powerlifting meet. And that's not true because I coached my wife in it because she competed with me and it was awesome. But she had a lot of anxiety around the fact of not going to the gym for a week and expecting to be stronger. Because in her head, when you go to the gym consistently, you get stronger. So if you take a week off, you're going to come back and you're going to be weaker. But we had to have some conversations about that because this is not how it works, because you're reducing your fatigue and that makes you stronger. But what you can do, and we did do to kind of help put her at ease, and is a great thing to do for some blood flow and even some recovery actually, is to do that light technique work. So you should just think of it as trying to get a little bit of blood flow for recovery but also it's like your technique week. So you had your peak week, now you have your technique week. And so you just want your form to be really, really, really good. You want to practice all of your cues, and then you just want to just practice doing the lifts. And for me, that was actually really beneficial, especially on deadlift, because as I said, I didn't hit any of the deadlifts I hoped that I would on the second workout of my peak week. And my back was feeling really, really tired. It felt like, where my glutes insert on my pelvis were just like sore and achy. And I was really, really worried that I was going to injure my back again at this powerlifting meet when I was trying to go as hard as I possibly could. So I really, really tried to focus on really clean technique that was going to be, back protective and everything during that technique workout. It was one workout, but it was really, really good. Now, the other benefit of doing that sort of technique workout is that you've kind of getting yourself to the point where your squat, your bench, and your deadlift are all ready to be trained on the same day, because it is kind of light, but it's common. You could do them on all different days, or I actually do deadlift and bench commonly on the same day, and then squat a different day, and then a bench again. But then this just kind of gets you to the point where you've done all three on the same day, so they're all going to be similarly recovered on the day of the meet, so you kind of have a really, really good idea of how strong you're going to be. But again, really just your deload week, you're just relaxing. You could do a little bit of technique work, but you don't want to overdo it. You really want to get rid of that fatigue. Now, moving into phase 5, the competition. I'm excited for that, but there's some things I want to talk about, again, just from my experience of what I did leading up to this. Actually, a lot of this was during the deload week. But anyways, your competition, for starters, standard, you would have 3 lifts. You'd have your opener, your second, your middle lift, and then you have your finisher. And pretty much the standard advice is when you have 3 attempts is to do your first attempt something you know you can do, your second attempt be something you think you can do, and your third attempt be something you hope you can do. And so for me, let's say on squat, I know that I can do 405 because I had done it, and hypothetically I'll be a lot stronger because of my deload week. My fatigue's gone away, but I know I can do 405 because I've done it. So that would be my opener. Then I think because my fatigue has been managed, I could do 415, and I hope I can do 425 on my squat. So that would be a very standard. Maybe the jumps would be a little bit bigger. Some people, strategize it really well. There's lots of strategies you can take. Some people will, do something they know they can do to get some weight up on the board on their first attempt, and then try and maybe hit a personal PR on the second attempt, and then just jump 60 pounds to try and hit a world record. This would be if you're a pretty elite power lifter, but there's different strategies that you can employ. But a very standard piece of advice is something you can do, you think you can do, and you hope you can do. So for us, like I said, the competition was on a Friday, and we had to do weigh-ins on Thursday. Now, I am going to talk a little bit about how carb loading and cutting weight, that's actually a pretty big jump, because it was Thursday morning we did weigh-ins, and Friday night we did the competition. The reason they did it that way is just because, like I said, it was put on by a college, and so it's not quite the same. I think, if a standard powerlifting meet, probably be opposite. You'd probably weigh in that night and then compete the next morning. And so if you were trying to do some sort of cutting weight or carb loading techniques, you'd be a little less extreme because you don't want to have bad side effects. But anyways, I guess going straight into that. This competition, another way that it was less conventional is that they only had 3 weight classes. They had lightweight, middleweight, and heavyweight. And so lightweight for this competition was less than 170 pounds, and then heavyweight was greater than 205 pounds, and then the middleweight was that 170 to 205. So those are actually really, really big weight jumps, right? You technically could have a 120-pound guy competing against a 169-pound guy in the lightweights. You could have a 170-pound guy versus a 205-pound guy in the middleweights, and then you could have a 206-pound guy versus a 300-pound guy in the heavyweights. So usually, in powerlifting, there are more weight classes than that. Usually there's 15 pounds or so, I think, each. Everything in high-level powerlifting is done in kilos, and so I don't know exactly how everything goes. But It's going to be a little more strict than that. And so leading up to this, I weighed about 215, and I wanted to see if I could get myself into the middleweight division, because I figured there's going to be lots of guys at 170, 180, 190. And so if I, as a 215-pound dude, could cut enough weight to get down into 205 and then compete there, and then carb load and rehydrate, and probably go back up to 210 or 215, then I could kind of blow all the other guys out of the water. And that would have been the case, definitely. But, I mean, if you can tell, YouTube watchers again, I took first place even though I did compete in heavyweight. Now, the reason for that was because we didn't have any 300-pound guys in the heavyweight competition at this meet, although I do know that there, in other competitions the campus has put on, there have been, so I was a little worried. But the reason that I decided to still compete in heavyweight was because they sent out the rules, and they said that they were going to be giving out awards for your total weight lifted divided by your body weight, and that was it. And so I actually decided that since I was at the lighter end of heavyweight, all the other heavyweight guys that might be heavier than me, there's a good likelihood that if you're 250 or 300 pounds, a good portion of that is fat mass. And so you're going to have to be lifting for that fat mass, at the same weight that I'm lifting for my body weight in order to beat me. And at that point, if you beat me and you've lifted for your fat mass, then you deserve it. You just beat me, which is awesome. And so I decided that I would lift in heavyweight rather than in middleweight, but then they actually give out awards for your total divided by your body weight as well as just for your total. And then I actually lifted the heaviest total of all the heavyweights too, and I was probably the lightest heavyweight there, so the competition went really, really well. But if I had cut down and gotten in the middleweight and they were only giving out total, then I would have beat them. But the guy who won the total divided by body weight in the middleweight beat me at his total divided by his body weight. And so it ended up working out really, really well for me. My total would have been better than I had the heaviest total in the competition. I mean, it makes sense. The heavyweight men's heaviest total is going to have the heaviest total in the competition. But anyways, that's a very long-winded way for me to say that I tried to do a weight cut, and I didn't get down to 205. And again, I kind of intentionally decided not quite to, but I did want to get down to like 206, 207, just to give myself as many pounds as I possibly could for that, denominator of my score. And so I was able to get down from 215 to 207. And so I did that by a number of ways. The first one was that I ate in a calorie deficit for a couple weeks and got down probably to 212. Let's see. I can look at my calendar over there. Got down to 212, 215 to 212 in that time span. And then for the week of the competition, I also ate the ketogenic diet. And that's something I've talked about in previous episodes that I don't really care for, the ketogenic diet. I think it's not a good diet for most people. Carbs are good for you, great for energy. But I did the ketogenic diet just so that I could lose the water that was associated with my muscle and liver glycogen to drop weight. And it worked. I dropped another couple pounds. And then I did a dehydrate the day before, where I think I lost another 4 pounds or so. And, I guess real quick, one thing I'll say completely candidly is that the keto diet sucked. I've never tried it actually. I've always just thought that it would probably suck, but it was miserable. It was the worst thing I've ever done. I was writing myself this diet for when I was going to do the keto diet, and I just thought this is going to be great. Like, I'm going to have a lot of bacon and eggs and steak, and it's going to be so awesome, just eating a lot of meat. But no, like, my calories were done in no time at all. Like, because, fat has so many more calories. And so I was not able to eat as much food as I wished that I could have ate. I drank a ton of diet soda to just have anything, because it wasn't a lot of volume, because I wasn't even in fruits and vegetables, because those had carbs, because I just really, really, really wanted to get all my muscle glycogen down to make this weight. And just to get the volume that I hoped to eat, I ended up eating just a ton of just chicken breast and mustard. And sucked. So now I can personally, genuinely actually say that the keto diet is miserable, and I don't think anyone should try it. Anyways, got a couple pounds down, and that was great. Then I did a dehydrate. It was pretty simple. All I did was I think I limited my water the day before weigh-ins, so that would have been the Wednesday. I think like 32 ounces or something. And then I walked on a treadmill in a hoodie for a little while. We went hot tubbing as well, so I could just try and sweat. And I lost probably 4 pounds there as well. You will hear of people doing incredibly extreme weight cuts, especially in like wrestling and like UFC fight sports, to get down to weight classes, and they lose 10, 15, 20 pounds. If I had a sauna, maybe I could have done that, but I don't have access to a sauna. Other people do, and then they really just go in there and sweat. Some people will like suck on a cough drop and then spit into a water bottle so that they're drying themselves out with their saliva. Again, if I was trying to get down to 205 to really, really get into the middleweight, I might have tried something a little bit more extreme, but all I was trying to do, because of the way that I decided to do it, was to just try and get myself as low as I could and stay in the heavyweight. So I got down to 207, and so I just kind of did it pretty moderately. But a guideline that I would give to people if you are trying to cut weight, especially if it's going to be like a more traditional thing, like you're going to weigh in the night before and then compete the morning after, then you really shouldn't probably try to cut weight more than 5% of your body weight. The big tactic to make weight should be losing body fat mass for months, even up until the competition. But like your last minute kind of cut, where you're trying to, maybe drop glycogen in your muscles and water and maybe lose that last little bit of fat, it shouldn't be more than 5% of your body weight. So if you were 200 pounds, 10 pounds is what I recommend. Just because that difference in hydration and muscle glycogen availability is going to greatly, greatly impact your performance. So I was not worried about it because I had such a time in between my weigh-in and the competition, but it's not something that I recommend everyone goes crazy at. Anyways, another thing that I did that week of the competition was I didn't have any caffeine, not even like a Dr. Pepper or Mountain Dew, because I wanted to reset my caffeine tolerance. And that was actually kind of tough because I had cans of Dr. Pepper and Mountain Dew sitting in my fridge all week long. I love a diet soda. I am a big diet soda drinker. And I didn't have, I did have diet soda, but nothing with caffeine. I had no pre-workout all week to kind of reset my caffeine tolerance. And then the first time I had it was the day of, probably an hour before the powerlifting meet. And then I had another scoop right as it was starting. And so I had a ton of caffeine after not having had any for a long time. Reset my caffeine tolerance, did really, really well there. Felt awesome, felt super high energy. And then, of course, after I did the dehydrate and the ketogenic diet to cut carbs out of my muscles, I rehydrated and I carb loaded the day before. So Thursday morning, again, it's a Friday night competition. Thursday morning, I did weigh-ins. And then right after weigh-ins, I started drinking a ton of water with lots of electrolytes, salt, potassium, and then I had a ton of carbs. In fact, I tracked the whole thing. And Thursday, after weigh-ins, I had 5,200 calories that day, 230 grams of protein, 880 grams of carbohydrates, and 100 grams of fat. If you were doing a carb load similar as I did, you want to keep your protein and your fats pretty low, as well as your fiber. You really want it to be like sugary, quick carbs that are going to digest well and easily and make it into muscle glycogen. Now, you don't have to do a ketogenic diet before doing a carb load, but one benefit is that, your muscle and your liver glycogen are so depleted that when you eat all that sugar and all those carbs, it really goes in a big way straight to your muscles. And so I had, 880 grams of carbs to try and fuel myself up. It was very little fiber. I mean, decent enough. It was probably 30 grams of fiber, which is normal for a day. For 5,000 calories, I usually eat 30, 40 grams of fiber on 2,000 calories. So it could have been a lot higher. Fats as well and protein just kind of slow digestion down a little bit. You need them, but try and keep it low-ish. It's, your carb load is not an excuse to eat anything you want. But but it can just be nice. I had oatmeal, and I had Mike and Ike's, which are my favorite candy, and bananas, and I had full sugar Gatorade to get all of these carbs up and up and up. And it went super, super well. The day of the meet, I just tried to eat at caloric maintenance. Of course, 5,200 calories that I ate on Thursday was way above my caloric maintenance. And then on Friday, I still wanted to be eating lots of carbs, Rice Krispie treats. We bought a box of Gushers to bring to the competition that I had in between lifts and things. But you didn't want to go crazy. I don't want to add to my adipose tissue or anything like that, but I just want to make sure I'm fueling myself. So that's what I did there. So the day of the competition probably had just 3,000 calories leading up to the competition. And with that was me. I was ready for my competition, which is our phase 5. So my openers, again, you had to name these at weigh-ins. I said that my opener for squat was going to be 405. My opener for bench press was going to be 335, and my opener for deadlift was going to be 485. And so all of these lifts I had done before in peak week. Now, deadlift, I was actually pretty nervous about, just because I really wanted to do more than 485, but I was nervous about how my back was feeling. Of course, deadlift is the third and final lift that you do in a powerlifting meet, so I didn't know if I was going to be fatigued, but anyways, I just did 485. I actually heard a bit of advice that coming out of a powerlifting meet, I super agree with and would echo to everybody. It says you're never going to regret going a little bit lighter on your deadlift opener because you're already going to be tired from your squat and your bench press. So your squat, obviously, it uses your legs, uses your butt, uses your lower back. Your bench press, even though, of course, it's an upper body exercise, but I found that my glutes and my lower back got sore even just from my arch on my bench press. And so that was still a little bit fatigued for my deadlift. And so I was really, really glad that I chose 485 to do for my opener. It went really well. Again, these were a little bit different because this was a 2-attempt meet rather than a 3-attempt meet. And so you kind of want to just push yourself a little more. You want to get weight on the board, of course, but you only have, after your opener, 1 attempt to hit whatever PR that you want to do. So you got to be careful. In fact, I got first place in the heavyweight weight class, but I would not have if everyone programmed themselves well. So the third place lifter in the heavyweight weight class, he squatted 50 pounds more than me. He deadlifted 100 pounds more than me. And so he had a lot of wiggle room on his bench press. He could have probably just bench pressed like 225 and, took first place at the meet. But he was a little overzealous with his bench press attempts. Now, we talked, it was a great competition, really, really fun. Nobody was praying for their competitors' downfalls or anything. It was really supportive and really awesome environment. But I talked with him a little bit about it, and yeah, he wanted to attempt 315 for his opener on his bench press, and he didn't get it, which he said he was super frustrated about. But it seems like he was, a little fatigued from his training that week, and he, I think he did his warm-up a little bit too much. He warmed up too much and kind of used a little bit too much steam just on his warm-up, and maybe he just, was overzealous with how much he thought he was going to bench press. And so unfortunately, though he got 2 attempts to try it, he didn't get any weight on his bench press. So his total that took third place in the meet was just his squat and his deadlift. He's a very, very strong guy, very, very strong guy, but just because he didn't hit his bench press attempts, I won the competition, which I stand to benefit from, but it's a great example of he could have had first place easy, and I would have been walking home with second. So you got to be careful about that. Anyways, on my squat, I did 405 for my opener, and it moved pretty well. My plan was just to do 415 because I really didn't know, especially with how I did it on peak week, it was really slow and it was really painful. And so I didn't know exactly what I was going to be able to do. So in my head, I was just going to do 415 on my second attempt. But then something about it, I was just feeling really, really good and amped up. And so I decided to go for 425 on my second, and I hit it, which was great. Bench press, I hit 335, which I knew I could because I'd done it 3 times until that point. And then, it was kind of a struggle still, but I wanted to try 345 for my second attempt, and I got it. Maybe I could have got a couple pounds more, but I'm really happy with that 345 number. My deadlift, I did that slightly lighter opener of 485, and it moved really, really well. The fatigue had been managed. My lower back wasn't feeling too bad anymore, which was good. So I got that 485 up on the board, and then I could have done 495, but I decided I wanted to go for 505. I was feeling pretty good about it, and I got that as well, and that put me at a total of 1,275 pounds. At my weigh-in weight, the scale that they had, I weighed in at 208, although I weighed myself at 207 at home, which is fine. But then that put me at 612% of my body weight lifted at the meets for first place in both regards. And there you have it. So it worked pretty well. Science is cool. I'm glad that I knew everything that I did and was able to coach myself in that way. I guess I'll end with this little plug. I offer coaching. This episode is sponsored by me and nobody else. I don't have any official sponsors, though I would love to. I hope you guys enjoy this content. One day when I hopefully do get some sponsors, they will be the highest quality products that I trust and I genuinely endorse. I'm not going to sell out, but this is sponsored by me. I offer coaching for whatever your goals are for specific sports. I love to train sport-specific athletes. I love to train powerlifters. I love to train bodybuilders. I hope you guys will trust me and my knowledge that I have. I've gotten great results myself and helped several clients now get great results for themselves. Coached my wife in her powerlifting meet. I have coached pregnant and breastfeeding women. I've overweight men to help them lose weight. Athletes as well. And today's episode is sponsored by me. If you'd like to support this podcast, please like, comment, share with a friend. All these things really help boost the algorithm. You can rate the show on Apple and Spotify. You can follow me on Instagram. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Truly, truly, this helps all these platforms know that people are enjoying the things that I'm teaching over this podcast, and that really helps me. Those are great zero-cost ways to support this podcast, or you can support this podcast by signing up to do coaching with me, or if you know somebody who's looking for a coach, recommend me to them. This is what I love to do. I love learning and teaching and studying and researching nutrition and exercise. It's what I'm passionate about. I thank you guys so much for joining me today and letting me ramble about my passions. Thank you for listening. This has been the Science of Sports Performance.